There was a large city that was plagued by a mysterious entity known only as the Night Stalker. It was said that this dark humanoid only appeared at night, and it would terrorize the city's inhabitants with its haunting presence. People reported seeing the Night Stalker in their dreams, and some claimed to have seen it lurking in the shadows on the streets. It was said that anyone who looked directly into its eyes would be frozen with fear, unable to move or scream for help. As the night progressed, the Night Stalker would grow more and more powerful, feeding on the fear of those it terrorized. Some nights, it was so powerful that it could control the minds of entire crowds of people, making them do its bidding. Despite numerous attempts to catch the Night Stalker, it always seemed to slip away into the shadows. The police were powerless to stop it, and the city was thrown into a state of constant fear. One day, a young girl came forward with a plan to defeat the Night Stalker. She claimed that she had seen it in her dreams and that she knew its weakness. She led a group of brave people into the city's dark alleys, determined to put an end to the Night Stalker's reign of terror. In the end, they managed to confront the Night Stalker and defeat it, freeing the city from its grip of fear. But to this day, some say that the Night Stalker still haunts the city, waiting for the right moment to return and claim its power once again. There was a small, isolated village nestled in the heart of a dense forest. The villagers lived a peaceful life, never venturing too far from their homes and always keeping to themselves. One day, a stranger came to the village and told the villagers of a haunted house deep in the forest. The villagers had heard of the house before, but they had never dared to venture that far into the woods. But the stranger was insistent, telling them that the house was the source of all the evil that plagued the village. Despite their fears, the group of brave villagers decided to venture into the forest to investigate the haunted house. As they approached the house, they saw that it was surrounded by a dense fog that obscured their vision. When they finally reached the house, they were horrified to discover that it was inhabited by a horde of ghostly creatures. The creatures were hostile and aggressive, and they seemed to be fueled by an insatiable hunger for human flesh. The villagers fought desperately for their lives, but they were vastly outnumbered. In the end, only a handful managed to escape the house and make it back to the village. From that day forward, the villagers never ventured into the forest again. They told the tale of the haunted house to generations of their descendants, warning them never to venture too far from the safety of the village. And to this day, the house remains abandoned, its ghostly inhabitants still lurking in the shadows, waiting for their next victims. There was a tree in the middle of a dense forest, known as the Cursed Tree. It was said that anyone who stepped foot near it would be cursed with bad luck and misfortune for the rest of their days. Many villagers lived in fear of the tree and warned travelers to stay away. But there was a brave young man who lived in the village, and he didn't believe in the curse. He was determined to prove that the tree was just a myth and set out one day to confront it. When he arrived at the tree, he was amazed to find that it was just an ordinary tree, but with strange markings carved into its trunk. He reached out to touch the markings, but as soon as his fingers brushed against the rough bark, he felt a jolt of energy run through his body. Suddenly, the tree came to life. Its branches reached out, trying to grab the young man, but he managed to escape and ran back to the village to tell everyone what had happened. The villagers were horrified and urged the young man to leave the forest, but he refused. He was determined to find a way to break the curse and save the tree. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months as the young man spent every waking moment studying the tree and the curse. Finally, one night under the light of a full moon, he found the answer. The curse could only be broken if someone offered their own life to the tree in sacrifice. The young man didn't hesitate. He returned to the cursed tree and climbed to the top, where he offered his own life to break the curse. The tree accepted his sacrifice, and a bright light exploded from its branches. When the light faded, the tree was no longer a menacing presence. In the heart of a dark, sprawling city, there was a tall, foreboding building known as the Black Tower. The tower was abandoned and had been for as long as anyone could remember, but strange rumors and whispers about it circulated among the city's inhabitants. Some claimed that it was haunted by the spirits of those who had lived and died within its walls, while others whispered of strange noises and lights that could be seen in the tower's windows at night. Despite the warnings, a group of adventurous teenagers decided to explore the Black Tower one night. They snuck into the building and began to make their way up the rickety stairs to the top. But as they climbed higher and higher, they began to feel a growing sense of unease. The air grew colder, and the darkness seemed to close in around them. When they finally reached the top floor, they found themselves in a large, empty room. But in the center of the room was a strange, glowing orb, pulsing with an otherworldly energy. The teenagers were curious and approached the orb, drawn in by its eerie light. As soon as their fingers touched the surface of the orb, they were transported to a strange, alternate world. They found themselves in a nightmare landscape of twisted, gnarled trees and putrid, swampy ground. Horrible creatures lurked in the shadows, and the sky was a sickly shade of green. The teenagers soon realized that they were trapped in this strange world, unable to escape. They were forced to face their deepest fears and confront the horrors that lurked in the darkness. But just when all hope seemed lost, they discovered that the only way to escape was to face their fears head-on and destroy the source of the evil that had trapped them there. They set out on a dangerous journey, fighting against overwhelming odds and battling their own inner demons. In the end, they were victorious and managed to destroy the source of the evil, breaking the spell and returning home. But they were forever changed by their experience, and the memory of the Black Tower and the strange world they had visited would haunt them for the rest of their lives. There was a small, isolated village at the foot of a dense, dark forest. The villagers lived simple lives, but they were plagued by strange and frightening occurrences. Every night, a ghostly figure would appear in the village, causing mischief and terrorizing the residents. No one knew who or what the ghost was, but it was said to be the spirit of a long-dead witch, seeking revenge on those who had wronged her in life. One day, a young woman from the village decided she'd had enough of the witch's reign of terror. She was determined to put an end to it, no matter what it took. She journeyed into the heart of the forest, determined to find the witch's grave and put her spirit to rest once and for all. The young woman soon found herself lost in the dense, tangled undergrowth, but she refused to give up. She pushed on, deeper and deeper into the forest, until she finally stumbled upon a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was a withered old tree, with a single, glowing orb hanging from one of its branches. The young woman approached the tree, drawn in by the strange, pulsing light of the orb. But as soon as her fingers touched the surface of the orb, she was transported to a strange and terrifying alternate world. She found herself face to face with the witch, who had been waiting for her. The witch revealed that she had been trapped in that world for centuries, bound to the tree by a powerful spell. The only way to break the spell was for someone to take her place, and the young woman had stumbled upon her prison by accident. The witch offered her a choice. She could either take the witch's place and be trapped in the alternate world for all eternity, or she could return home and allow the witch to continue her reign of terror in the village. The young woman was faced with a difficult decision, but in the end, she made a brave choice. She took the witch's place, sacrificing herself to save her village. The spell was broken, and the witch was finally put to rest. And the young woman was remembered as a hero, a brave soul who had given her life to save others. Once upon a time, there was a mercenary named Jack who lived a life of solitude, traveling from one war-torn country to another, taking on dangerous jobs that paid well. He was known to be one of the best marksmen in the world, and he was feared by those who crossed his path. One day, Jack received a mysterious job offer from a wealthy client. The client offered him an exorbitant amount of money to carry out a mission in a remote, abandoned town in the middle of a dense forest. Jack accepted the job, intrigued by the challenge and the money. As Jack entered the town, he felt a chill run down his spine. The town was completely silent, and there was not a single soul in sight. The buildings were decrepit, and the air was heavy with an eerie feeling. Jack soon realized that something was off about this mission. As he made his way through the deserted streets, he suddenly heard a sound that made his blood run cold. It was the sound of footsteps, but not just any footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, as if someone was stalking him. Jack quickly unsheathed his weapon and took cover behind a nearby wall. The footsteps grew louder, and Jack could feel his heart racing in his chest. Suddenly, a figure appeared from around the corner, and Jack aimed his weapon. To his shock, he saw that the figure was a ghostly apparition, with a pale complexion and piercing, empty eyes. Jack was frozen with fear, unable to move or even speak. The ghostly figure slowly approached Jack, who was now paralyzed with fear. Just as the figure was about to reach him, Jack suddenly woke up, drenched in sweat. He realized that it was all a nightmare, but he couldn't shake off the feeling of terror that had gripped him. From that day on, Jack was plagued by nightmares of the ghostly figure. He couldn't shake off the feeling of dread that had taken hold of him, and he soon realized that the job offer he had accepted was cursed. He tried to back out of the job, but it was too late. He was already caught in the grasp of the evil forces that haunted the abandoned town. From that day on, Jack was never seen or heard from again. Some say that he was consumed by the evil forces that haunted the town, while others say that he still roams the earth, cursed to be hunted by the ghostly apparition for all eternity. There once was a small village, surrounded by dense forests and tall mountains. The villagers lived simple lives, and they were content with what they had. However, there was one house in the village that was different from the rest. It was old and decrepit, with windows boarded up and overgrown with vines. No one dared to go near it, as the villagers believed that it was haunted. One day, a young couple decided to move into the abandoned house, despite the warnings of the villagers. They were determined to make the house their own, and they worked tirelessly to renovate it. However, strange things started to happen soon after they moved in. They would hear strange noises in the middle of the night, and they often felt like they were being watched. One day, the wife went into the basement to do laundry, and she never came back up. Her husband searched the house and the surrounding area, but she was nowhere to be found. The villagers were shocked, and they feared that the wife had fallen victim to the ghostly presence that haunted the house. Days turned into weeks, and the husband became more and more desperate to find his wife. He spent all his time searching for her, and he refused to leave the house. The villagers tried to convince him to leave, but he wouldn't listen. One night, the husband heard a noise coming from the basement. He cautiously made his way down the stairs, and there he saw his wife, standing in the middle of the room. But something was different about her. Her eyes were empty and her skin was deathly pale. The husband was shocked, and he tried to approach her, but she suddenly lunged at him. It was then that the husband realized that his wife had been possessed by the ghostly presence that haunted the house. He screamed in terror and ran out of the house, never to return. The villagers tried to enter the house to help, but they were unable to do so. The house remains abandoned to this day, and the villagers still fear the ghostly presence that haunts it. Years later, a group of brave adventurers decided to explore the abandoned house. They entered the basement and found the husband, who had been locked in a perpetual state of terror. He was still alive, but he was unable to speak or move. The adventurers tried to help him, but it was too late. The ghostly presence had claimed another victim. Detective James was a seasoned cop who had seen it all. He was known for his courage and his unwavering determination to solve even the most difficult cases. But one call would change his life forever. It was a dark and stormy night when Detective James received a call from a frantic woman. She claimed that she was being stalked by a strange figure that was following her every move. Despite the late hour and the treacherous conditions, Detective James agreed to take the call. When he arrived at the woman's house, he was greeted by a sense of unease. The woman was visibly shaken, and she told Detective James that she had been seeing the same figure for weeks. She described it as a tall, dark figure with glowing red eyes. Detective James didn't believe in ghosts or supernatural beings, but he could see the fear in the woman's eyes, and he decided to investigate. He searched the surrounding area, but he couldn't find any trace of the figure. Just as he was about to give up, he heard a strange sound coming from the woods. He cautiously approached the source of the sound, and there he saw the figure, a tall, dark being with glowing red eyes. Detective James was frozen with fear, and he felt a chill run down his spine. Just as he was about to turn and run, the figure suddenly disappeared, leaving behind a trail of smoke. Detective James couldn't explain what he had just seen, but he knew that he was dealing with something far beyond his understanding. He tried to tell others about the figure, but no one believed him. He was soon consumed by fear and paranoia, and he became obsessed with finding the truth about the figure. Years passed, and Detective James never found any answers. He was eventually transferred to another department, but he never forgot about the strange figure that he had encountered. To this day, he is still haunted by the memory of that dark, stormy night, and he wonders if he will ever find the answers that have eluded him for so long. The man stumbled through the dark, damp streets of the city, his vision blurry from the alcohol he had consumed. He was lost, and he had no idea how he had ended up in this part of town. As he stumbled forward, he suddenly found himself falling, tumbling down a steep incline into the foul-smelling darkness below. He hit the ground hard, his breath knocked out of him. Dazed, he looked around and realized that he was in the city's sewer system. He tried to find a way out, but it was difficult in the darkness. Every turn he took seemed to lead him further into the maze of pipes and tunnels. He could hear strange noises all around him, the drip of water echoing in the distance, the scurrying of rats in the shadows. He was filled with a sense of unease and fear. As he stumbled forward, he suddenly heard a low growl. He froze, his heart racing. The growl grew louder, and he realized that it was getting closer. He tried to run, but his drunken legs wouldn't obey him. He stumbled and fell, hitting his head on a pipe. When he came to, he was no longer alone in the sewers. A hulking, shadowy figure loomed over him, its eyes glowing in the darkness. The man tried to scream, but no sound would come out. He was paralyzed with fear as the creature advanced on him, its claws extended. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. The man was alone once again in the dark, damp sewers. He lay there for what felt like hours, too scared to move. When he finally mustered up the courage to get up, he found that he was no longer lost. He was somehow back on the streets, and the sun was rising. He never spoke of what had happened to him in the sewers. Some say that he was never the same after that night, that he was haunted by the memory of the creature that had confronted him. Others say that he simply stumbled upon a doorway to a different dimension, and that he was lucky to have escaped with his life. But one thing is certain, no one ever entered the city's sewer system after dark again, for fear of encountering the mysterious, terrifying creature that haunted its dark tunnels. There was a small town located deep in the forest, surrounded by tall trees and thick fog. The town was known for its mysterious disappearances and strange noises that echoed throughout the night. One day, a young couple decided to hike into the forest to explore its beauty and eerie charm. They walked for hours, taking in the breathtaking scenery, when they stumbled upon an old abandoned cabin. The couple was fascinated by the cabin and decided to take a closer look. As they approached the cabin, they noticed that the door was slightly ajar. The couple cautiously pushed the door open and stepped inside. The cabin was empty and quiet, with only the sound of their footsteps echoing through the halls. But as they continued deeper into the cabin, they noticed something strange. The walls were covered in disturbing drawings and writings, describing horrific scenes of death and bloodshed. Suddenly, the couple heard a low growl coming from the shadows. They froze in fear as a large, hulking figure emerged from the darkness. It had glowing eyes, razor-sharp claws, and a mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth. The creature let out an ear-piercing screech and lunged at the couple. The couple managed to escape and ran as fast as they could through the forest. But they soon realized that they were being pursued by the creature. They could hear its footsteps getting closer and closer, and the growling getting louder and louder. Just when they thought they had lost the creature, they stumbled upon a clearing in the forest. In the center of the clearing stood a large stone monument, with the words "You should not have come here" etched into the surface. The couple turned to run, but the creature had already caught up to them. They screamed as the creature attacked, but their screams were cut short as it devoured them whole. To this day, no one knows what became of the couple or what kind of monster resides in the abandoned cabin in the heart of the forest. But those who dare to venture into the forest speak of strange noises and mysterious disappearances, and some say that the creature is still out there, waiting for its next victim. It was a typical night for the worker, who was closing up a store after a long day. The store was located in a quiet shopping center, surrounded by empty parking lots and tall trees. The worker was used to working late and was always cautious when leaving the store, making sure to lock the doors and windows securely behind them. But tonight was different. As the worker walked through the aisles, turning off the lights and making their way to the front door, they felt a sense of unease. They couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. As they reached the front door, they noticed that one of the windows was slightly open. The worker was certain they had closed all the windows before leaving the store. They cautiously approached the window and peered outside, but all they could see was darkness. Suddenly, a hand reached through the window and grabbed the worker's shoulder. The worker screamed and spun around, but there was no one there. The hand seemed to have come out of nowhere. The worker tried to run, but their legs felt heavy and sluggish, as if they were moving through molasses. They made it to the front door and tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. The worker was trapped. They heard a soft whisper coming from the shadows, saying you should have left when you had a chance. The worker turned around and saw a figure slowly emerging from the darkness, with glowing eyes and a sinister smile. The worker screamed for help, but their voice was barely a whisper. The figure approached slowly, until the worker could see its face. It was a twisted, demonic version of their own reflection. The worker tried to fight back, but the figure was too strong. It lunged forward and consumed the worker whole, leaving no trace behind. The next morning, the store was found still locked and secure, With all the lights turned off, the worker was never seen or heard from again. Some say that their ghost still haunts the store, warning others to leave before it's too late. There was a man who always felt like something was off in the world. No matter what he did, he couldn't shake the feeling that reality was not what it seemed. One day, he stumbled upon a strange website that claimed to offer proof of a glitch in the Matrix. The site was filled with strange videos and cryptic messages, but the man was drawn to it, as if it held the answers he had been searching for. The man started to notice strange things happening around him. Objects would move on their own, and he would see shadows moving in the corners of his eyes, even though there was no one there. One night, as he was lying in bed, he suddenly found himself in a different place. It was a dark, eerie world, filled with strange, twisted creatures. The man realized that he was in a parallel universe, where reality was completely different from the one he knew. The man tried to find a way back to his own reality, but the more he searched, the more lost he became. He was trapped in the parallel universe, with no way out. As the days went by, the man started to experience more and more glitches in the Matrix. He would randomly find himself in different places, with no memory of how he got there. He was tormented by strange visions and haunted by the twisted creatures that dwelled in the parallel universe. The man was slowly losing his grip on reality. He was consumed by the glitch in the Matrix, until he was no longer sure what was real and what was not. To this day, the man is still lost in the parallel universe, trapped in the glitch in the Matrix, never to return to the reality he once knew. There was a small, isolated village in the middle of a dense forest. The villagers lived simple lives, surrounded by nature and free from the worries of the modern world. But there was a dark secret hidden in the forest. A monster lived there, preying on the villagers and terrorizing them for generations. The monster was said to be a shapeshifter, able to take on any form it desired, and was impossible to kill. One day, a young woman from the village disappeared without a trace. The villagers searched the forest for days, but there was no sign of her. A few weeks later, the woman returned to the village, but she was not the same. Her eyes were blank and her movements were mechanical, as if she was controlled by an unseen force. The villagers soon realized that the monster had taken her and was now using her as a vessel to move among them, undetected. The villagers tried to banish the monster, but it was too powerful. They turned to a wise old sage who lived on the outskirts of the village. The sage told them that the monster could only be defeated by someone pure of heart, who was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. A young man from the village stepped forward, offering to be the sacrifice. The sage prepared him for the task, teaching him ancient spells and incantations to use against the monster. The young man entered the forest, and after a long and grueling battle, he was finally able to defeat the monster and restore the woman to her true self. But as he made his way back to the village, he realized that he had been changed by the battle. He was no longer human, but had become a monster himself, cursed to roam the forest for eternity, preying on the innocent. The villagers never saw the young man again, but they always remembered his sacrifice and told his story to each new generation, as a warning to never underestimate the power of the monster that lurked in the forest. There was a small, isolated village in the middle of a dense forest. The villagers lived simple lives, surrounded by nature and free from the worries of the modern world. But there was a dark secret hidden in the forest. A monster lived there, preying on the villagers and terrorizing them for generations. The monster was said to be a shapeshifter, able to take on any form it desired, and was impossible to kill. One day, a young woman from the village disappeared without a trace. The villagers searched the forest for days, but there was no sign of her. A few weeks later, the woman returned to the village, but she was not the same. Her eyes were blank and her movements were mechanical, as if she was controlled by an unseen force. The villagers soon realized that the monster had taken her and was now using her as a vessel to move among them, undetected. The villagers tried to banish the monster, but it was too powerful. They turned to a wise old sage who lived on the outskirts of the village. The sage told them that the monster could only be defeated by someone pure of heart, who was willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. A young man from the village stepped forward, offering to be the sacrifice. The sage prepared him for the task, teaching him ancient spells and incantations to use against the monster. The young man entered the forest, and after a long and grueling battle, he was finally able to defeat the monster and restore the woman to her true self. But as he made his way back to the village, he realized that he had been changed by the battle. He was no longer human, but had become a monster himself, cursed to roam the forest for eternity, preying on the innocent. The villagers never saw the young man again, but they always remembered his sacrifice and told his story to each new generation, as a warning to never underestimate the power of the monster that lurked in the forest.